actually, no, what the trouble is there. Yeah, should we remove this? Do you think?
Do you want to?
Well, it's just, we'll block it. No, that's fine.
I can remove it if you want me to.
No, I think it's fine.
And we'll project it up on the
Fine,
screen.
okay. So, are you guys good to go?
Right, so leave it here.
So, James, you're James Willis. I'm going to introduce you, and then you introduce the others. And tell them what the session is about. Okay, so next session now is the Converged Security Centre. And to chair this is James Willison, who I'm going to hand over to. He's the founder of Unified Security Ltd, together with Saab Sembi from Virtually Informed Limited. James.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gardner. Thank you for your welcome, and thank you for coming to see us here at the Converged Security Centre. We're running a Converged Security Centre just over there, and it's the first time in a security event that you will see cyber and physical security people meeting together in one place and talking about the same risks. And this is what we want to try and encourage. So I'm very privileged to welcome James Chong from Vidsys. They provide a technology which helps cyber and physical teams actually see the risks and work out what to do with them, what's the next step, how to respond, how to recover, and so on. And this is what we want to try and encourage today. I'm also joined by Saab, who's worked with me on security convergence for about 15 years now. And I'd like to take you back, just introduce myself. 15 to 20 years ago, I was in physical security, I was a guard, and I wanted to try and improve things for the security guards in our environment. And basically, they're having a hard time of it, they're not well paid. But how can we improve that? And I thought about this, and I went to study at Loughborough University, and they helped me to study security management. I now tutor there, and basically, we were researching how is it that we can bring together physical and cyber security people and actually look at these risks. Because now, with the Internet of Things and everything else, all our systems are going to be compromised, and we really need to understand where the risks are. If we don't, then one of those systems will lead you to a problem, and you can't respond to it because you're in a different center, and the physical person has got the camera, but he doesn't understand that it's a cyber attack. So the camera is down, but he hasn't got any idea, and he needs some help. So we're trying to encourage organizations, and we know that there are some, notably Barclays and other leading organizations, have one center with physical and cyber security in there. And this is what I was dreaming of 15 to 20 years ago when I was a guard, because we want to raise the level for everybody rather than and have a unified approach. Whereas apart from government and the military, and all praise to them for what they do, in the commercial world we don't see enough of a unified approach. It's always, the security center is run by the physical team, and the cyber operations center is run by the CISO, and he's she's very good at that, but they're not looking after the attacks on the camera or the physical access control, and yet they could be. They could all be in the same place. They'd save a lot of money by having one center, just not build two centers. But nevertheless, what goes on is that they're still building physical operations centers or cyber security ones, but they could build just one and then have all these systems, which James is going to show us later, and they can look at them and understand them and then respond. And if they had the teams as well, cyber and physical together, looking at those together, they can work out the GDPR problems that we're all hearing about now. Oh dear, what are we going to do about the security of the data? Well, they've got a cybersecurity specialist with them. They can't be expected, you can't expect most physical security people to understand all the different technologies that there are out there. And so this is why the value of bringing them together in one center is really important. And if you don't do that in the digital world we live in, you've got no chance really in 1 or 2 years or even now of actually responding to an IoT attack on your SCADA system or your water. And hopefully, James might share, there are organisations doing this, but they are in the minority rather than majority. Okay. Well, I was going to introduce. You're going to go next. Okay. And James is from Vidsys, which I said is a one platform, basically, or he'll tell you a bit more, but it's one platform, so every system, every physical security system, and now cybersecurity system can be brought in and analysed, and then you can get a response from that. But I'll let him explain that.
Thank you. Thank you, James. And Kevin, thank you so much. So my name is James Chung. I'm the CEO and founder of Vidsys. And as James just mentioned, today is an exciting era for security. Because if you want to go back historically, any of you remember a very significant event that happened in 2003 going into 2004? Think about what that timeline may look like back in 2003 and 4. That was the first year digital video recording outsold VCRs. So audio recording was overtaken by the digital evolution for the first time in the security market at this kind of trade show. What happened is the introduction of migration era in security. And so in the security era, you had the migration of analog to digital, which started to happen around 2004. And for about 10 years, the migration era continued, where the users, the practitioners, the designers were all now starting to figure out, how do I go from analog to digital? That migration era basically came to about 2015. During that time, between 2005 and 2015, the other significant event was the integration era. Any of you that are in the systems integration business knows that it's a lot easier to integrate once you have things digitized onto the network, onto the IP. What now is happening is that between 2015, for the next 10 years plus, this is the convergence era in security. I hope you will remember that it went from migration era to the integration era to now the convergence. In 2020, just a couple years from now, guess how many IoT devices will be connected to the cloud? About 20 to 50 billion objects will be connected to the cloud, depending on the analyst that you talk to. So in the next couple of years, everything from your Fitbits, to your phones, to your cameras, to your cyber threat devices, to your building automation, to the SCADA systems, will be literally connected to the cloud into the IoT applications. And so today, I wanted to give you that brief introduction as we kind of fast forward into where we are today, and also what we are showing you at the Converged Security Centre, which is out on the show floor. So if I can continue, at the show floor, we have a couple of partners. Micro Focus, who is a leader in AI, or artificial intelligence, video analytics, big data. They are the spin-out merger of HPE Software, the 6th largest software company in the world. They have also their analytics running in most of the platforms around the world that people don't even know about, because it is underneath the umbrella. And what we're doing with Micro Focus is helping to collect the data, correlate the data, and also with another partner, with Unisys, they have a technology called Stealth. Stealth is an agent that runs on your network continuously and looks for threats on the cyber side. And so now, with Micro Focus on the video and the rich media, and also the audio analytics and the AI, with the analytics and the agent for cyber from the Unisys side, these are all being brought into Vidsys. How many of you have heard of the term PSIM? P-S-I-M. I hope many of you. PSIM was a term that I came up with in 2006. I Googled it, and one hit was on Google. The engine car parts, PSIM. It was pistons and something else, but PSIM was introduced with the concept to bring the SIM from the IT world, the security information management, security event management, and then simply adding the word physical in front of it, because we knew we had to speak to the IT industry, because IT was going to converge with physical security. So today, the interesting fact is that we now have organizational convergence starting to happen in different pockets. And this is going to drive the innovation, drive the acceleration of convergence. Also, today, we are truly living in the data world, right? I mean, how many of you are carrying mobile devices or data capture devices? Maybe you're being tracked and you don't even know it. Maybe your Twitter accounts or your social media. But today, we are sitting in the window, which is very seldom ever experienced. Because since Adam and Eve to today, guess what? Over 90% of the data has been created in the last 36 months. Over 90%. Also, every day there are towers of data being generated. So, as we talk about convergence, what's important is not so much on creating more data, but how do we make sense of the data? How do we convert data into meaningful and actionable information? This is the beginning of the discussion around convergence. Also, in terms of what we are seeing, obviously, many of the users, the customers, the implementation teams understand there has to be a ROI, or return on the investment. Well, there has been some recent studies where every agency is spending basically $1 million plus per incident, which I think is personally fairly low. You know, we talked about experience, data breach, and other incidents, but today a breach is very significant in terms of cost. An airport terminal, if they shut down one airport terminal in the United States, in one of the major airports, the loss is $30,000 US per minute if you have to do a dump of a terminal. And so the breach and the cost of the data breaches and security breaches is nothing to joke about, because today we are truly living in that converged world. And so some of the things that are important for us to also know is that in order to collect and to filter and to correlate the data, you have to be able to collect that from all of the different systems and subsystems. On this show floor, we have thousands of technologies. And today, using application programming interfaces or software developer kits or different protocols, we are able to connect them through the network and bring that together to a collection point. And so what Vidsys does is we collect the data from all of these different systems that are both in the cyber world and the physical world, and unify it so that you have a single dashboard, just like a race car driver on a Formula One track. So you can see all of your threats in real time and be able to provide the response of what to do when there is a breach. Cybersecurity, physical security experts in this room, you know there is nothing ever guaranteed, right? We can never guarantee total annihilation of security breaches, right? It's really about how do we respond when there is something, how do we mitigate the risk, and then how do we do it in a way that's consistent, that is auditable, that is reportable, and you can learn from. This is a process. And as experts in the industry, we have to help educate the people in the industry, in the market, that security, especially the convergence, is not just about the technology, but it's about the process and the people combined with the technology. So what you see on the screen are a lot of the subsystems that Vidsys has already done connectors and integrations to. And so we have about 350 different connections to all different makes and models. We are currently doing a smart city project in the UAE, where we're connecting 150,000 buildings into Vidsys using IoT applications. So these are sizes of the data that we see in the industry that is starting to really grow and accelerate. And so I think our message today is really giving you some insight and allowing you to come and learn a lot more about some of the details behind the scenes. So with this in mind, as we kind of bring together some meaningful use cases and scenarios, at the Converged Security Center, we have several use cases ranging from smart transportation, where using intelligence, analytics, AI to create alarms and events, and also protecting the insider threat and outsider threats, both in terms of traffic arena. We also have some threats in a financial services arena that might be happening. We have a lot of banking institutions that are, again, threats from the inside more so than from the outside. And so again, those use cases are what we have put together to share with you in more detail. A couple of the other things that we're doing is also using this sort of the action plan diagram to help you understand the whole process of converged security. So what you see on the left-hand side is really the detection, identification, the incident occurring. This could be somebody with a badge, badging in, say here at IFSEC in London, but their same identity is remoting in VPN from Washington, D.C., where I am from. And so you cannot have the same person doing a badge swipe in IFSEC who is logging in remotely with the same identity across the ocean. That will create an incident in a converged security arena. That then helps you to go through the rules and geospatial engine. So based on time, location, duration, frequency, and type, we can correlate and filter all the data to tell you when something is happening that is of your interest. And so that then goes into the situational awareness and management. So what you can do is consistently provide it to you in real time. And then that can become a response in terms of sending your internal security team or your IT team or your other assets to help protect this incident from spreading and also to getting you back to operations in a normal sense. And at the same time, all of this is being captured so that you can actually create reports that can be shared amongst the stakeholders so you can continue that process evolution. And so this diagram was just simply put together to help you understand the storyline in a converged security arena. And I wanted to, again, give you a little visual, as this includes some of the events, such as what's happening right now in the FIFA World Cup venues, where you may have cameras, you may have social media tweets. If there's some external threat events that are being captured, with a converged security platform, you can correlate that data that's coming from external data and then go into the arena and see where some of those individuals may be or where that source of the data could be coming from. And so today, we have the ability to integrate external data, including even weather or earthquakes or other events that are external threats, bringing together the assets inside of your venues and then giving you the process to be able to go and follow through on that. So I wanted to kind of give you a little visual of how some of the physical and logical can be brought together into a unified view. And we are starting to see some major requirements around the world, including the US, where people are truly starting to recognize the value of having converged security, not just the physical or not just the logical. And one of the utilities, one of the largest in the US, already has created a Unified Security Operations Center called a USOC, where the same operator is now monitoring cyber events and physical events in the same dashboard with the common procedures. And so this is truly an era where we're starting to see the growth of convergence. And so we hope that you can partner with us in really helping to educate the market and as well as to providing some of the intelligence behind the scenes. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Sard.
Thank you very much, James. Hello, is this working? Yep, good. The convergence story for me is slightly different because I came from a background which is cybersecurity, and it was about 14, 15 years ago when I looked at CCTV cameras, and my interest when I looked at them was because network CCTV cameras were getting very big at that time, and I knew people who were in that field and were supplying. And I had an interest in just exploring, and I was thinking to myself, what should I research into that's of interest or could be of interest to a lot of people? And I researched into the vulnerabilities of network CCTV cameras, and I was amazed at how insecure they were. So I went and spoke to my friends who were suppliers at the time, and I said, just out of interest, how secure are your cameras that you're supplying? Have you any idea? They said, well, what do you mean secure? They are surveillance devices. What do you mean they don't need to be secure? And that showed to me at that time that there were probably not just people like my friends who were suppliers, but maybe other people who hadn't actually looked at the security of the device themselves. So I started looking at the devices, and then I went from CCTV cameras to access control systems, heating, lighting, air conditioning, burglar alarm, fire alarm. Basically, I was interested in anything that sits on the network that is unattended, but the people responsible for it are people who don't understand cybersecurity or IT security or any type of security like that, but were interested in physical security. So that's what my interest was, and I was amazed at the gaps. So my first introduction to IFSEC, when I came along the very first time, I came along to speak to vendors. So I went around a lot of the stands that are here today, and I went around asking them, I said, right, that looks like an interesting device. Can you tell me what security you've put into this device? And all of them would turn around and say, oh yeah, you know, we leave the security to the network layer. And to me at that time, I was thinking that's just such a cop-out, because the whole thing about cybersecurity is you have cybersecurity in depth, and you have a layered approach. You have lots and lots of different layers of security, not just one. And then I came across this one vendor when I asked them, tell me about security you have in this device. And he said, well, we have 3 layers of security. And I said, oh, that sounds good. What are they? And he said, well, we have the admin layer security, we have the super admin layer of security, and we have the ordinary layer security. I said, okay, so what you're telling me is that all of them can access using a username and password. He said, yeah. I said, so what you're telling me then is, if a hacker is a not very good hacker, and it takes them 6 months to crack your passwords, you won't know. And if you've got a really good hacker who's got a tool that can hack, because they can go through so many different variations, they can hack your device within 2 or 3 minutes, you still won't know. He said, oh, I see what you mean now. And this was happening to me year after year attending IFSEC. Unfortunately, I was lucky enough to meet James, and speaking to the organisers here, about 10 years ago, we started to speak about converged security. So when I was looking at devices, I accidentally became interested in bringing the two sides together, because here I was in an enterprise where, you know, all these devices were sitting on the network, and the cybersecurity people weren't interested, because they said, we're not responsible, they're not our devices, we can't do anything about it because we're told they're not ours. And then you had the physical security people saying, well, yeah, of course these are our devices, but we're not responsible for them because they're on the network. We don't do network security, we do surveillance and so on. So for me, that story started when I started to find out what the problems and issues were around the two different sides, and everything in those days was siloed. So coming here today, after X number of years speaking within IFSEC, to be working with James on a Converged Security Centre is very exciting, because now we have got a better technology solution and a better approach, and people more willing to listen and interested in a converged approach. Because if you think back to any movie you ever saw about hacking, what you will see is a hacker sitting there, and they're not thinking to themselves, you know what, this requires physical hacking. I better ring up one of my mates who's good at physical security hacking and get them to help me with this. Basically, the bad guys sit there and they work and try and find out what's the best way in. They never try and silo what skills are required. Whereas within an enterprise, we try and silo all the skills and we separate them instead of working together. So my approach and James's approach and what Vidsys offer is a unified approach where you're coming together and you don't silo everything. You're looking at some of the events that are coming in from a point of view where you've got a single view of risk at a very high level. And that is the way that things should be done. And that's really why I would encourage you, if you've got time, come along to the Cybersecurity Centre and take a look at some of the use case scenarios that we have. So I'll pass it back over to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Saad and James. And before I ask any questions from the floor, I'd like James to just share the fact that, which you didn't, and I know you can, explain that Vidsys and their partners Unisys and Micro Focus can now protect systems from these cyber attacks. Because what happens up till now, we hear a lot in the news, oh no, we're going to be hacked, we don't know what to do. And there's a solution, there are solutions to this now. And if you could just share a bit about what they are, and then we'll go our questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as James just mentioned, really the evolution of the technologies and applications that are available today are totally different from even 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I think the common thread is that risk has always been there since the beginning. But today, how we solve that problem has definitely also become more sophisticated. And how we're doing the solutions is really not only providing that technology, but also unifying the people and the process together. And so with that said, for example, with the Unisys Stealth platform, where it allows you to apply an agent to an existing environment. So you could have your existing security systems, your cameras, your network, your servers, even your UPS and power generation tools that are connected on the IP network, and it'll monitor for deviations or alerts from what's happening on the network. And so what that does is actually sends an alarm or an event into Vidsys using our external API, and that comes in, and what Vidsys then does is correlate between that event as well as what else is happening on the network, including the physical. So when we get an event from Stealth, we are able to then bring up the relevant cameras or other sensors and access control systems to see if somebody actually entered that data center or entered that area. With Micro Focus, we can now use the analytics as part of that camera to see, using facial recognition, is that person James? Or is it somebody else? Using the match against the facial recognition side. And all of this is happening in real time. So from the time that you had a breach, from the notification, say from the Stealth from Unisys, and then capturing that on the analytics on the Micro Focus side, Vidsys then unifies the video, the alarm, the access, and also the policies, and then presents that to the operators that were responsible for monitoring for that threat. And then giving them the procedures and the workflow to go through systematically to secure and to mitigate that from continuing. And so this is sort of a simplified view of how Micro Focus, Unisys, and Vidsys works as really one large solution. James.
Thank you so much. And finally, we've just asked some questions, if there are any questions for us. Okay. Yes, yeah. Well, I'd like to thank James and Saad and Mr. Gardner as well for coming here today. And I would encourage you to think about this in your own organisations. There are lots of more, as I mentioned, Barclays, they don't mind being told about. But just to think about whether you could save a lot of money by just having one centre, for example. It's fairly obvious. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say that for me, I think that was one of the most interesting sessions we've had all day. The statistics there are absolutely staggering. And I think in many ways, we're actually kind of sleepwalking into an era that we don't understand. Well, these guys understand it, but I don't. So that was pretty fascinating. I'm just going to give you a very quick upsum of of the day, just to kind of take you through what we've done today, because I don't know how many of you were here earlier today. We started this morning with Michael Chertoff, former Director of US Homeland Security, where he took us through the whole range of security threats, from jihadist terrorism to far-right terrorism to cyber to insider to aviation, and even mentioning migration and climate change as possible threats to security. We then had the transportation or the transport security panel, where we focused very much on aviation. Again, looking at the insider threat, we covered laptop bombs, liquids and gels, and the difference between overt and covert security and the advantages of each. Then there was the grey space protection session, where we looked at ways and means of protecting that grey space between secure areas, looking at instances such as the Manchester bombing and others. Cyber threats was chaired by Ed Lucas, who has written a superb book called Cyberphobia, which I can recommend. And that was a keynote speech by Professor John Mallory of MIT. And then, of course, well, I missed the session after that, but then we had the convergence era. And just to recap some of those staggering statistics that we've heard from the panel here. So by 2020, according to James on my left here, there will be 20 to 50 billion objects, new objects, connecting to the cloud. I mean, that's just a staggering number. And then the fact that over 90% of data that exists today was created in the last 3 years. And finally, the value of the IoT market, the Internet of Things, is valued, and I suspect that this is just a number frankly plucked out of the air, but that's me being a cynical journalist, $7 trillion. So look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you for coming. See you tomorrow morning at 10:30. Cheers.
Didn't matter